Hello, YouTube. Let me bring to your attention today three views on the subject of reptilian civilization from Belarus and Russia. That's where the views are from. It's good to expand our horizons, and I just wish we could hear from China as well on the same subject, because the subject is fascinating. The first view is from the science editors of the Russian Komsomolskaya Pravda newspaper. Have you heard about the hypothesis about the reptilian civilization that seized power on Earth? Serious scientists, in particular paleontology professor Dale Russell from the University of South Carolina, believe that such a scenario could well be realized on our planet if 65 million years ago, a 10-kilometer asteroid would not have destroyed the dinosaurs and thus opened the way to the domination of the planet by mammals. In the end, it resulted in the domination of the planet by you and me, that is, human beings. However, let's go in order. What does a T-Rex and a German Shepherd have in common? Back in 1982, Professor Russell decided to conduct a thought experiment and imagine what would happen if the asteroid Chicxulub flew by and not impact our planet. Does this mean that intelligent beings would not have appeared on the planet in the next 65 million years? Not at all. Even if mammals and primates fail to raise their heads, so to say, the dinosaurs themselves could have evolved. Among them, a large class stood out: theropods, predators that moved on two legs and small front paws were used for auxiliary purposes. That is, the anatomy allowed them to grow arms to use tools. It was up to the brains. Of course, the genetics of lizards was oriented in such a way that they managed to produce a colossal body size, the height of a 5-story house, but they grew very small brains. However, paleontologists have found out that not all dinosaurs were just huge walking stomachs. To measure the intelligence of lizards, a matching method such as the encephalization coefficient, EQ, is used. It estimates the size of the animal's brain relative to the size of its body. In Tyrannosaurus rex, the EQ is about 2.4. For comparison, in a German Shepherd, this indicator is 3.1, and in humans, 7.8. So, Stenonychosaurus, translated as a lizard with narrow claws, in them the encephalization coefficient was 6 times higher than the average in dinosaurs. This lizard was about the size of a man, and Russell calculated that over 65 million years of evolution, that brain could reach a volume of 1,100 cubic centimeters, which is comparable to the volume of the human brain. We have this indicator in the range of 1250 to 1600 cubic centimeters. Russell's reptiloid was capable of walking upright. It had 3 fingers on each hand, respectively. It was able to grab objects, big eyes, binocular vision, and dinosaurs had excellent starting positions to become a sentient being. It would differ from us only in that it could not breastfeed the cubs. After all, reptiles do not have mammary glands. Most likely, it would have fed the children by regurgitating the food it ate, as some birds do now. And the speech of a reptilian would be like the chirping of birds. And more recently, the validity of Russell's assumptions was confirmed by a study of neurologist Suzanne Herculano-Hausel from Vanderbilt University in Tennessee, United States. She tried to use another indicator, namely the packing density of neurons in the brain. The fact is that in modern birds, close relatives of extinct bipedal dinosaurs, the packing density of neurons in the brain is much higher than in mammals, for example. And this in particular allows the raven, whose brain weighs only 15 grams, along with dolphins and chimpanzees, to lead the ranking of the biggest brains among animals. Crows perfectly make tools from improvised materials, sticks, chips, and leaves, to pick out larvae. This circumstance, the density of pecking neurons in birds, prompted Suzanne to check whether the approaches used in the study of the brain of birds can be applied to dinosaurs. The professor developed an equation linking the mass of an animal with the number of neurons, and it turned out that the brain of the theropods, bipedal predatory lizards, obeys the same laws as the gray matter of warm-blooded birds, such as ostriches. Well, Aleoramus is a 6-meter predator that lived about 70 million years ago on the territory of modern Mongolia, had just over 1 billion neurons in the cerebral cortex, about the same number of capuchin monkeys, said Suzanne Herculana Hausel, and in the brain of Tyrannosaurus, weighing 400 grams, 3.3 billion neurons were packed. This is more than a baboon. Such a huge predator, about 10 meters tall, with the intelligence of a primate, it really was something terrible. Some scientists agree with Suzanne, others believe that there are too many arbitrary assumptions in her work. However, it is quite possible that evolution could have taken completely different paths. Man did not necessarily have to become the crown of creation. Other animals could well have claimed this role. The dinosaur hypothesis looks pretty reasonable. By the way, the reconstructions that Dale Russell did in them, intelligent reptiles looked suspiciously similar to the green man from Alien films. A coincidence? Well, the editors of the newspaper don't think so. Now, let's move to the other view. This is the view of Gennady Vlasenko, Belarusian writer and biologist. He published it in the analytical newspaper Secret Research. Vlasenko remembers the first time he read the fantastic novel by the American writer Harry Harrison, titled West of Eden. In this novel, we are presented with a kind of alternative to our present, the evolutionary development of life on Earth, or rather, what would have happened if a giant meteorite, one of the most common hypotheses of the demise of the dinosaurs, had not struck the Earth 60 million years ago. Before us is a very advanced civilization of Lylan, intelligent dinosaurs. This civilization, unlike the Newman one, is not mechanical, but rather biological. However, those who wish can get acquainted with this fascinating novel themselves. Here, Vlasenko has cited Garrison's fantastic Utopia as an example only because immediately after reading it, the Belarusian biologist suddenly thought, and could dinosaurs, more precisely, any group of dinosaurs, really become intelligent if they had time for that? However, they had just the right time for this, because dinosaurs existed and dominated the Earth for 165 million years. At different times, different kinds, of course. But the total age of mammals is much shorter, no more than 65 million years. Vlasenko means the time of their undoubted domination in nature. And nevertheless, during this relatively short time, one of the mammalian species, man, not only gained intelligence, but also managed to first rise above nature and then almost completely subdue it. Moreover, it took him even less time and the strength of some 5 to 10 million years, including the most primitive hominids. So Vlasenko is slightly modifying his question, and now it will sound something like this. Did there exist any species of intelligent dinosaurs during the general domination of dinosaurs on Earth, even if they are intelligent at a rather primitive level? Let's just say at the level of our Neanderthals. So could this have happened or could not? No, a sane reader would say. Stop, says Vlasenko. He already understood what the reader meant, that dinosaurs were stupid, brainless, cold-blooded creatures, and this alone proves already that this somewhat risky assumption is not only, to put it mildly, absolutely fantastic, but if diplomacy is discarded, even absurd. Well, maybe. But then the question arises, were dinosaurs really like that, stupid, slow, and cold-blooded? And in general, do dinosaurs belong to reptiles, where the vast majority of researchers continue to attribute them out of habit? Or is it a completely separate class of chordates? And this class is much closer not to reptile, but say to birds. Let's try to figure it out. What do we know about the dinosaurs? In fact, for quite a long time, people did not even suspect the very existence of these dinosaurs in the distant past of our Earth. However, some believe that the basis of all the legends about dragons was precisely the genetic memory of mankind about dinosaurs, and maybe not only genetic, but perhaps people also still had to deal with the last extinct representatives of them at the very dawn of their civilization. And the first finds of huge fossilized bone remains for a long time put scientists of that time at the dead end. And dinosaurs got their name only in 1841. Their godfather was the famous English scientist Richard Owen. He coined the word dinosaur, which means terrible lizard. Then it turned out that a huge number of terrible lizards once lived on Earth, and not all of them were great and terrible. Their length ranged from a meter to 25 meters or more. True, among the dinosaurs, there were plenty tiny ones, the size of a small chicken, but the general term or name, terrible lizard, remained. Not all dinosaur species lived at the same time as mammals. Some species replaced others. By the way, dinosaurs appeared on Earth almost simultaneously with mammals. But all the time while dinosaurs dominated our planet, mammals remained a modest role of small nocturnal animals, huddled somewhere on the very margins of evolution. And the dominance of dinosaurs lasted for a long time, about 135 million years, although their heyday fell on the Cretaceous period, which began 130 million years ago and ended about 70 million years ago. And despite such a long dominance in nature for a long time, all dinosaurs seemed stupid, slow, clumsy, a type of giant lizards. But as time went on, more and more new data accumulated in science, and now the possibility is being seriously discussed that dinosaurs did not have a 3-chamber heart, like all other reptiles, but a 4-chamber heart, like mammals and birds, but also a constant body temperature, as well as the presence of a very developed maternal instinct and complex care for offspring. And did they eventually become extinct, these very dinosaurs? Vlasenko is not talking about the mysterious monster of the Scottish Loch Ness, and not about the equally mysterious Mokelem Bambi from the swamps of Central Africa. Do they really exist there, or is it all just a myth, a legend? No, Vlasenko is talking about something else entirely. By the way, do you want to see an almost real dinosaur? There's nothing easier. Go out into the yard and look at the most ordinary chicken. Then mentally imagine a chicken that has multicolored scales instead of feathers. Slightly increase mentally, of course, the size of the chicken's head, and instead of a horn beak attached to our scaly chicken, just slightly elongated jaws with small teeth. And instead of wings, let it have small forelimbs with 3 clawed fingers. If you could imagine all this in your mind, you would see a small dinosaur, countless of which lived in the warm, swampy forest of the Jurassic, say, period, or Cretaceous. Well, what does it prove? A sane reader or listener may object to Vlasenko, only that the ancestor of the chicken, like all other birds, were dinosaurs. By the way, then the intelligence of these dinosaurs should be no higher than the intelligence of a chicken. And what kind of an intelligence does a chicken have? Vlasenko agrees. Our domestic birds clearly do not shine with special intelligence. Neither could the vast majority of the same dinosaurs boast of this achievement. But even among mammals, there are representatives with a very low level of this very intelligence. A hedgehog intelligence is even lower than that of a chicken. Put a hedgehog and say a rat on the table and give them the opportunity to move freely. The hedgehog, without even slowing down, will step off the table straight into the void. Moreover, if instead of a table there was a balcony of the 10th, let's say, floor, the result will be exactly the same. The rat, having run up to the very edge of the table, will immediately stop and begin to look for an opportunity to safely descend to the floor, and it will find this opportunity, to be sure. But there are mammals smarter than rats, a chimpanzee, for example, or a dolphin. A human person, well, he's a mammal too. So why can't at least one intelligent species appear among the huge number of unintelligent dinosaurs, or at least almost reasonable, in the same, let's say, Jurassic period? Speaking of the Jurassic period, or more precisely about Jurassic Park, in addition to the film with this name, there's also a novel, and Vlasenko read this novel too. So they're representatives of one of the species of predatory dinosaurs. The velociraptors even possess some rudiments of reason, even if only at the level of our distant ape-like ancestors, but nevertheless. Vlasenko agrees a fantasy or science fiction novel is not the most weighty argument in scientific dispute, and velociraptors, and they really existed, could hardly claim to be the most intelligent dinosaurs, although they had some rudiments of reason, in his opinion. Why does Vlasenko think so? Yes, for the same reason as the author of Jurassic Park himself. But first, a little bit about velociraptors. They were relatively small dinosaurs, weighing about the size of a leopard, extremely agile and very bloodthirsty. They hunted larger herbivorous dinosaurs, and necessarily in packs like our wolves in winter. But wolves are one of the smartest modern animals. Scientists have even established that they have a kind of language with which wolves can talk to each other during a joint hunt and even coordinate their joint actions in some way. However, wolves, alas, will not become reasonable. This initiative has been firmly intercepted by their eternal enemy, human being, man. What about velociraptors or some other small herd dinosaurs, predatory or at least omnivorous? Why not herbivores? So after all, a human being became a human person only when he switched from vegetarianism to a meat diet as a more high-calorie one. By the way, many of the dinosaurs, unlike the same wolves, moved exclusively on their hind limbs, leaving the front ones free for what? And could some of the most advanced dinosaurs mentally use them to master the most primitive tools, stone or wooden? And if so, could they gradually improve these tools of their own as our distant ancestors once did? Well, that's too much. A sane reader will certainly exclaim here. There must be a limit to every fantasy too. After all, if dinosaurs, one of their many species, really had a civilization, or at least its beginnings in those distant times, at least some of its remnants should have been preserved in the earth's thickness. Traces of dwellings, tools, jewelry. Where is all of this? And Vlasenko says, tell me, how much has been preserved from the dwellings of people of the Stone Age? Not caves, but say wooden buildings. From the same Neanderthals, for example, or even from the early Cro-Magnons. But no more than 100,000 years have passed since then. And how much could have been preserved over a period of 100 million years? Yes, during that time, the stone would turn into sand, not to mention wood or ceramics? And in what form do we extract iron products from the depths of the earth that have lain there only several thousand years? Multiply this period by 100,000. Or here's another. Imagine then 10,000 years ago, the fall of a huge meteorite again, like 60 million years ago, destroyed most species of mammals and, first of all, primitive people. And then in another 50 million years, some intelligent insects or mollusks will seriously discuss the question of whether these primitive mammals could have intelligence, even at its most rudimentary stage. And of course, this issue will be resolved negatively by them because no traces of this very mind will be found in the thickness of the earth rocks. However, if intelligent dinosaurs actually once existed, traces of their activity, albeit minimal, should still have survived to our time. They may have been preserved by one. Let's go one by one. These traces under 100-meter thickness of sedimentary rocks are not so easy to find, and a person can stumble upon them only by accident. 2. The remains of the dinosaur civilization can currently be located both under the seabed and under the thickness of Antarctic ice. 3. This civilization itself most likely has not yet had time to develop even to the level of our slave-owning society. And finally, even extracting something like this from the Earth's thickness, people prefer not to believe their eyes. It's easier that way. Yes, examples as much as you want. In the late 1930s of the 20th century, Ronald Byrd conducted field research near the town of Glen Rose, located southeast of Fort Worth, Texas. So among the paw prints of dinosaurs dating back to the Cretaceous period, about 100 million years ago, completely unusual footprints were found, similar to human footprints. Although much larger, the length of the prints was 15 to 20 inches, width 8 inches. And Brad Steiger, in the book The Secrets of Time and Space, published in 1974, talked about the discovery in 1927 in Fisher Canyon, Nevada, of a fossilized footprint from a shoe on which one could distinguish the imprint of a regular-shaped leather sole with a double seam. Geologists have established that this rock is Triassic limestone with an age of 160 to 195 million years. Strange finds of man-made products, iron nail, gold thread, etc., in the thickness of coal have been repeatedly noted in the media. Scientists' comments on such findings are rather monotonous. All this, they say, is either a so-called game of nature, where natural formations can resemble this or that product or print, or all this is just someone's clever practical jokes, intentional or even involuntary. However, it would be a clear exaggeration to believe Vlasenko himself is unconditionally convinced that once upon a time there really was a civilization of intelligent dinosaurs on our planet, or just intelligent dinosaurs who have not yet managed to create their own civilization. Vlasenko is not saying anything. He just thinks that this could have happened for a long time while the dinosaurs dominated our planet. And just because man managed not only to gain intelligence, but also to create a fully developed civilization, it cannot yet be argued that such a path of evolutionary development was the only possible one for the Earth. After all, and this should not be forgotten either, before turning its benevolent gaze towards mammals, nature made its first bet on dinosaurs, and it's not its fault that a meteorite that came so inopportunely interrupted this long experiment in the very middle of it, so to speak. And it happened no less than 60 million years ago. Dinosaurs disappeared, thus giving way to mammals on the evolutionary path. And for this, you and I, Vlasenko said, should be grateful to that meteorite of a long time ago. Or because if it wasn't for that meteorite, however, as the famous science fiction writers, the Strugatsky brothers in the USSR like to say, it would be a completely different story. Now, let me present to you ideas of Vadim Rostov, published in the Belarusian newspaper, analytical newspaper, Secret Research. Very interesting. The subject of the possible existence of a dinosaur civilization, Dinoman. It is so good that it allows you to see the odious misconceptions of modern evolutionary theory in a convex way. The dino-human of the science fiction writer Harry Harrison is only one of the candidates for an ancient terrestrial intelligent being. For example, in one of his works, the Soviet science fiction writer Vladimir Savchenko described a civilization of huge intelligent ants that lived on the earth hundreds of millions of years ago. Then they died out, but part of the colony was frozen in the polar ice and now thawed and came to life. In principle, huge ants are no less suitable for the role of a reasonable creature because they are a collective, and an anthill is already a kind of micro-civilization. However, all such assumptions about the existence of animal civilizations in the past are based on the most ridiculous Darwinian judgments about how intelligent man appeared, and in fact only extrapolate these misconceptions to other beings of the planet. So what are the misconceptions of the Darwinists? Why, for example, is a dinosaur suitable for the role of an intelligent being, and specifically Velociraptor? Only because it is erect, collective, with 3 forelimbs. So what about it? A huge number of creatures are upright, most are collective, many have 3 forelimbs. The once unscientific science fiction writer Friedrich Engels, in his work on the origin of man, invented that a monkey turned into you and me by taking a stick in its hands. However, today in nurseries, chimpanzees actively work with a stick, stones, cubes, anything, but for some reason they do not turn into humans. Moreover, the use of a stick just frees the mind from the torments of creativity in obtaining food and simplifies the life of a monkey. So the stick does not lead to an increase in intelligence, but just the opposite. It solves all the problems that could become an incentive for development. The Darwinists speculatively call the hunting tools of ancient men tools of labor. Although there was no labor in primitive societies, labor arises only when there is a market. But the ancient people just hunted or were engaged in gathering. Their spears and digging sticks, in principle, do not differ from the stones with which birds break hard-shelled eggs from the sky, or from the hurled and saliva-soaked twigs that monkeys push into an anthill or termite mound, collecting delicious insects for them. As for a hunting tool, and the most difficult one, there's a spider's web and beaver dams. They're the most complex structures made of wood. In a word, Engels and his colleagues made investigation. The reason they say that manufacture of hunting tools was the driving force behind the appearance of man, when in fact the different complexity of hunting tools is only the result of different levels of intelligence development. The manufacture of hunting tools has nothing to do with the creation of civilization at all, because theoretically civilizations are possible without hunting tools. For example, insects or ocean dwellers. Human speech is also not our monopoly. Almost all more or less complex creatures have their own language. For some, these are sounds, for others, the language of pheromones, for which the speech apparatus in our form is absolutely not needed. At the same time, for example, in insects, the secretions, traces left in the environment, are also the writing of this language. If the Darwinists were right in their inventions, then today we would be surrounded by thousands of civilizations of various intelligent beings that appeared hundreds of millions of years ago. Not only reptiles, amphibians, birds, mammals would have their own civilization, but also insects, where one colony, ants, termites, wasps, etc., is a collective intelligence, personality, and together a community of colonies creates a civilization. Do we see this? No. Therefore, the Darwinists began, in principle, to deny the possibility of the appearance of civilizations before man among the creatures of the planet, and deduced an unsubstantiated by them and their tools concept that they say man is the crown of evolution, and all other species are supposedly steps of evolution to create man. But firstly, this contradicts Darwin's teaching in general about random selection in the course of ruthless competition as a source of species formation. And secondly, it implies a kind of design of nature which looks very much like the creationism of religion, with the only difference that scientists use the term nature instead of the term God. But the most interesting contradiction lies in the fact that intelligent man has existed unchanged for at least 40,000 years, and human civilization only about 6,000 years. And before that, we had no civilization. So what is civilization? Civilization means the accumulation of knowledge, possible only with the advent of writing. And although Rostov called the insect enzyme labels above their writing, but in their true meaning, they are not writing, since they quickly disappear and do not remain for the needs of future generations. This is printing press in our understanding, but not books. The Neanderthals had no civilization. The Neanderthal wore clothes and jewelry, lit a fire, buried the dead, believing in their afterlife, and most importantly, he was able to speak and fully possess speech. The question arises, why did he not have a written language? But even Homo sapiens, who are about 40,000 years old, thought up to writing only in the last 6,000 years, although speech itself simply requires its own sign record, because it is the signs of the language in its phonetic performance. As illustrative fact, all the wildest tribes of the planet discovered by Europeans in recent centuries had their own primitive writing, even if only in the forms of knots or in the form of notches on something. That is, the gift of speech automatically provides for the gift of writing. But in this case, the appearance of writing in our country, Rostov means Belarus, 6,000 years ago, directly indicates that before that we did not exist with language and speech, either in the Homo sapiens civilization for another 34,000 years or in the civilization of the speaking Neanderthals. Even if we leave aside the speaking Neanderthal and consider only Homo sapiens, it is completely unscientific to assume that we have had our speech apparatus unchanged to this day for 34,000 years. But for some reason, no one has thought of writing during this monstrously huge time, with, by the way, the same brain volume. Man has not changed at all in 40,000 years, which already refutes the inventions of Darwin and Engels, because suddenly he changed and was born 40,000 years ago as Homo sapiens, and then zero changes in his body since the day of his birth. This discrepancy with writing, anyway, is another confirmation of the concept of the act of our creation, in which all archaeological finds of the period older than 6,000 years are only the props of the creator or creators. As for the impossibility of civilization among other beings of the earth, except for man, the original answer to this question is in the Bible. In Slavic translations by Francis Scarina and much later by Russian Bible translators, in the Bible translation, Russians lag behind their Western neighbors. The words soul and spirit are used. God gave soul to man and the spirit to animals. So in Hebrew, nephesh, 754 times in the Old Testament. Greek, psyche, 101 times in the New Testament. Spirit in Hebrew, ruach, 378 times in the Old Testament. Greek, pneuma, 379 times in the New Testament. What is it? If, from a scientific point of view, we look at the Bible not as folklore, but as a real record of the message from the creators who created us, ancient civilizations, which automatically assumes the existence of us in a virtual reality created by them or something similar, then the only conclusion can only be the following. From the point of view of virtual reality, computer science, these are the two structures that ensure the existence of a living, intelligent being, artificial intelligence in a virtual biological environment. The spirit is a matrix that organizes the virtual biology of the body, metabolism, cellular structure, etc. And the soul is a matrix that organizes a virtual consciousness. Native speakers differ from their non-native speakers in that they have a psyche, matrix for this purpose to carry out the work of artificial intelligence. And if this matrix is not provided by the experiment for dolphins or ants, then they will be inarticulate creatures. In the same way, no matter how much you train a cocktail of different chemical elements, it will not become alive without having a pneuma, that is, spirit, matrices for the living. As we can see, this is fully confirmed by the entire current scientific picture of our world, except for man, and then only in his last 6,000 years, which coincides with the time of his biblical creation. No one in the living world of the planet has evolved to reason and to civilization. Although in normal, that is, natural conditions, where we would not be the subject of the Creator's experiments, all the creatures of the planet would have the opportunity for such an evolution, not just us. In particular, a dino man, an ant-man, and anyone else would be quite possible. All attempts of scientists, for example, by a married couple of researchers, Gardner, on the example of a female chimpanzee Washu, and of Primac on the example of a female chimpanzee Sarah, all the attempts to teach higher primates a language and thinking similar to human ones ended in complete failure. What Darwinism allows, but what is impossible according to the Bible. And although the brain of higher primates is comparable in volume to the brain of, let's say, Romain Rolland, a French writer, known for his small brain volume, but only up to the age of 3. Humans and chimpanzees develop equally, and then a wall appears in front of chimpanzees. Further development of the mind is impossible, and chimpanzees until old age are individuals adequate in intelligence to our 3-year-old children. As we can see, the question of dinosaur civilization is already hanging in the air because even today, with all three forces of our science, we cannot artificially create even a chimpanzee civilization, although the latter are orders of magnitude closer to us and closer to a very concrete intelligence than hypothetical dino man and a biological carrier of intelligence in the form of velociraptors. So, there you have it. 3 very interesting points of view. I ask that you see my other videos about the dinosaurs and the possibility of their coexisting with human beings millennia ago. You are free to accept or to reject the explanations I have stated to you, but we need to explore more and more, and I will return to this subject in the future because I have more evidence, actually from the Russian history, that will interest you. I thank you for your attention to my work. If you can support my research, you will find how to do it in the description to this video. Please tell others about my channel, and please like my videos.